Mr. Ryan in Sacktown, you read a little bit of levity here, like kind of
Yeah.
like let's change the tone of what's going on in our country. I mean, maybe we talk sports, maybe we have a couple of laughs. I don't know. We'll just try something. You know what I mean?
I think it's a great idea. Look, we're united right now. See, unity,
Yeah.
everybody. Come together right here.
Yeah.
See?
Love it. Our hats aren't the same color, but other than that, we're doing pretty good.
You know what? 1 out of 2 is not bad, my friend.
But we got a lot of purple in the background. So, I think we're doing pretty good for the start of a week, right?
I would agree with that. Beautiful Monday. Nothing to be
Yeah.
ashamed of. Let's go. Let's get it.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, what did you watch this weekend? Because there was a lot of stuff on. What prioritized for me? What was your viewing habits this weekend?
It was a smorgasbord. We got some tennis, we had a little bit of golf, and then certainly, do you want to call it soccer? I'm not sure quite what that was last night, but a little bit of everything. Nate, some summer league. How about yourself?
I loved watching the tennis at Wimbledon. I thought the women's semifinals was incredible, and then the 3 sets on Saturday was good, but the tennis from the women's side on the semifinals, which actually would have been Thursday. But I will tell you, Alcaraz destroying Novak Djokovic the way he did. I mean, he just tore him up. Now, Novak did not play very well yesterday in the men's finals. And, I was watching that.
Yep.
But boy, that Alcaraz, he to be 21 and to be doing what he's doing in the world of tennis is unbelievable.
Pretty incredible. 2 Wimbledon titles. He's got the French Open and the Wimbledon back to back. It's a passing of the torch, Grant. And I know Djokovic had the knee issue that was just surgically repaired, but this kid's got a fire in his belly that is nothing but good for tennis.
I watched a little bit of the celebrity golf tournament, and I didn't watch any summer league, although I did see the highlights, which lasted longer than I wanted to because they showed every one of Bronny James' misses from 3. So that took a long time to be able to put that video clip together and then see him miss. What was it? 0 of 11? Unbelievable.
Something like that. Yeah. Second round pick, but this is what summer league is for. It's for development, Grant. I'm sure he'll be fine as a main man on the roster with the Lakers. Unbelievable.
I don't even know what else to say. I really don't. And again, without Devin Carter, because of his shoulder surgery, I don't have a lot of reason to watch the Kings. I know you probably have seen a little bit, but it's like, so I'm not really into it.
Yeah, you're really watching for one player, and that's Keon Ellis. You want to see what he's going to do, how he's going to follow up on
But I already know how
year.
Keon Ellis is. I already know. I watched him play a number of games last year. There's nothing that he's going to show me in summer league, good or bad, that's going to influence my opinion on what I saw last year. He's going against basically non-NBA competition for the most part. What is it that I'm going to ask you, what are you looking for in Keon Ellis that you don't already know?
I'm looking for the next step in progression based off of what he did last season at the end of the year, playing in a play-in game, moving on to the second play-in game. I want to see him grow, and especially he should be dominating, as you always say, because you're not playing against better talent or NBA talent. And Keegan Murray, he's taken those steps. That's why he played the California Classic last year, and that was it. But
okay,
Keon,
but what happened when he played the California Classic? He had some 40-something points in the first game, right?
Yes.
Okay, and I came on this show and I said it doesn't mean anything. It's a big deal. He should have 40-something points. He's going against non-NBA competition, and then this past season, all right, he had one game during the regular season where he had 47 points. Wasn't that a game that he had during but he had many games where he barely even scored. So I don't read anything into that, Ryan. I just don't. I never have. I don't read anything in the individual performances in summer league from a guy that's already played in the NBA as much as Keon Ellis played last year. It doesn't mean anything to me.
Understandably, I get that, Grant, but with this team, even though they've made the improvements with DeMar DeRozan, they are looking for internal improvement, and I get your take on it, but I need to see that from Keon. I need to see the leadership, how he pulls this group together that doesn't really play much together and probably won't much next season, won't even be on the Kings. So those are the little things. 5 turnovers a summer league game, that's what I don't want to see, Grant. That's that kind of Bronny James stuff. That is regression against lesser talent.
All right. If you want to get in on the program, you've got the link, you got the QR code, and we would love to have you join us here on the show. Now we're getting into the dog days of summer. We got the All-Star break upon us in Major League Baseball. We have not a lot going to be going on between now and the start of football season. I'm looking forward to the Open Championship at Royal Troon this week, beginning on Thursday. I played that course 5 years ago with my buddies for our 60th birthdays, and I love Troon. And I'll tell you, I get to Troon. They don't really have a driving range at Troon for when you go to play, right?
Sure.
And there's a putting facility and everything, but it's just, when you walk into the Troon clubhouse, you're just like, wow, it's a wow moment, right? And so I get to the first tee, and I'm looking at the fairway, and I'm looking at all of the obstacles on each side of the fairway. I'm talking about like moats. I'm talking about like incredible. Like, I mean, I had my driver in my hand, and I'm like, no. And I take my 3 hybrid out.
Nice.
All right. And I teed off on my 3 hybrid, and I hit a low screeching line drive, but I mean in the air, but low. And the thing hit right in the middle of the fairway and kept going and going and going. And I ended up teeing off with that for the rest of the day, and I shot an 87 at Royal Troon.
There you go. Yeah, you should be in the Open. How was the weather when you played?
We played 9 rounds of golf in 7 days, and it only rained for about 30 minutes, and it rained on the back 9 at Troon, and it rained so hard that we had to stop. They have these little like shelters, like little houses on the side of every now and then where you can go and, get out of the rain or lightning or whatever.
Sure.
And we actually had some lightning at Troon, which is kind of unusual for that part of the world, I think. But it was lightning, it was thunder and rain. So we had to go into a little shack and hang out there for like 20 minutes. That's the only time it rained the whole time we were there. And by the way, if you watch the Open, they have one of the most famous par 3s in the world. It's called the postage stamp. Okay. It's only about 100 to 110 yards long, depending on where the tee is. Okay.
Okay.
And when you stand on this tee box, you can actually see the undulation of the green.
Oh, wow.
And they have a bunker on the left. One of many bunkers around the green. It's called the coffin bunker.
Oh, boy.
And I hit a sand wedge, and my ball hits the green, rolls off into the coffin bunker. And I get into the coffin bunker, and my caddy says, I think he said, all right, mate, don't feel bad with what you get now on this hole, because the last time the Open was here, Rory had a 9 from this point.
Wow.
Okay. And I go, he had a 9? Yeah. He goes, anywhere on the green is a good shot, but you're not going to be able to keep the ball on the green. So just do the best you can to get out of the bunker. I'm like, what do you mean I can't keep the ball on the green? He goes, just do it your best. I hit what I thought is a great bunker shot, and the ball rolls off the green into a bunker on the other side of the green. All right.
Uh-huh.
The caddy says to me, he goes, listen, he goes, anywhere on the green that the ball will stop here is a good shot. So just anywhere on the green would be a good shot. I'm like, really? He goes, yeah. I hit probably my best shot of the week from a bunker, and I ended up like 4 feet from the cup.
Nice.
And my caddy was just looking at me in amazement, and I ended up making a putt for a 4.
Nice.
So I beat Rory by 5 shots.
Love
but
it.
I will tell you, when you stand on this par 3, and again, you'll watch the Open, you'll see it. It's the postage stamp. It's one of the most difficult par 3s anywhere, and it's only 100 yards.
It's incredible. That's what I love about golf. I just think it's great with certain course designs, the history, how it can look so simple yet be so difficult. You've been to Augusta. Talk about the steep hills there and the course.
It's quite a walk. And when I first arrived, I started at number 1, and I literally walked the entire course. That's the first thing I did.
Mm-hmm.
And you can't believe the hills and the valleys. But then when you are standing there and you see the undulations on the green, that's the one thing that TV doesn't really do Augusta
Right.
justice. You can't really see the undulations on the green. But when you are there in person, it's unbelievable.
It gives you a whole different appreciation. I haven't seen Augusta, but I've seen a couple. Torrey Pines, for instance, played that a ton in my times in San Diego. Smaller greens, but seeing just what you're talking about, playing that, being out there in person, it is a much different story and a whole new respect for those PGA Tour pros.
I am really looking forward to watching the Open Championship. All right, Zach says Team USA barely beat Australia. No one's going to be talking about Team USA playing Australia on July 15th. That's not going to be talked about the rest of the summer. It doesn't matter. All right. The only thing that matters is what happens when they get to Paris.
I think it matters a little bit on how they got to that score. I mean, Australia scored 68 points in the paint, Apes. 68. That is a lot. And that's one of the weaknesses of this team.
Wake me up when the Olympics start.
I got you, brother. I will give you a good wake-up call.
I mean, I remember 1980 when the United States Olympic hockey team was playing Russia in all of these lead-ups exhibitions, and they played at Madison Square Garden leading up to the Olympics before they went to Lake Placid. I think they lost 9-1. And then 2 weeks later they beat the Soviets. So I don't. Whatever. But you look at how they dominated in the paint. That's what you took away from that against Australia.
It's always been at times USA's weakness, if you want to say their teams have had weaknesses, but it's that mid-range. It was the backdoor cuts today. All the things that those European teams just thrive off of and live off of that you worry about with our guards. The foot quickness.
Who won the game?
USA, 98.
All right. So with everything that happened, they still won the game.
They did 18 turnovers as well. So they're getting their feet under them. Who knows if Kevin Durant's going to be there? But they got it done. So it looked good in the first quarter, 32 in the first. 10.
And they shouldn't need Kevin Durant. Baki chiming in, brothers, tomorrow, USA, Serbia. That's going to be a hell of a game. I'm looking forward to that. Baki, by the way, I'm letting you know this, Baki. I watched a lot of the Wimbledon and the semifinals of the women's bracket, particularly France against Croatia, was one of the best women's matches that I've ever seen. I'll tell you how good it was. I went and watched it again, and I already knew the outcome. I watched the match twice. That semifinal, France, Croatia, and the other semifinal was good, but it wasn't as good as that. Baki, spectacular tennis. The women's bracket in the semis and the finals, so much better than the men because it wasn't that competitive in the men's side. But boy, the women's, that was phenomenal tennis. And Baki says, agree. It was unfreaking believable. It was great.
Good stuff. Wimbledon usually delivers, and new star building too in the women's tennis side. You need that from time to time.
Cody says, Grant, do you remember hearing about a young Chris Mullin making a name for himself in New York? I hadn't really heard of Chris Mullin before St. John's. Obviously, being from Long Island and St. John's basketball with Lou Carnesecca being so huge, and as soon as Mully got to St. John's, we knew about. I don't really recall that much about him in high school, if that's what you're asking.
I got a good Chris Mullin story. We were in the off season playing at a gym down in the Bay Area that one of my buddies was a member at. Chris was also a member, playing a pickup game with Mullin. He goes to drive baseline, Napes, and I stopped him. I kind of got him in the corner, and he stops for a second, and he hesitates, and then he looks at me, and he looks down, and he's like, what am I doing? He just puts it right over the top of me, back down the court.
I love it. Baki says, Donna Vekic. Yes, it was fantastic. It's a shame that someone had to lose that match in the semifinal. Again, it was one of the best matches that I've ever seen. She was phenomenal. They were both. It was phenomenal tennis. But back to St. John's, when I was growing up, St. John's was a national powerhouse with Lou Carnesecca. That whole conference was, Syracuse. We used to go to all the ECAC games at the Garden. My dad used to take us to Madison Square Garden for all the holiday festivals, or a lot of times we'd be watching, Villanova play Seton Hall or Syracuse play St. John's. And it was great college basketball. The atmosphere at Madison Square Garden for all those games was spectacular.
What do you remember about Madison Square Garden? Whether it was from your professional time or as a kid, when you walk in that building and you smell that smell of the Garden, what's the first thing that comes to mind?
Well, as a little boy, before they moved into the new Madison Square Garden, the old Garden had 2 levels, and the upper level was the balcony where we used to sit most of the time for the hockey games at the old Garden. And the first thing I remember as a kid was how blue the air was, because you were allowed to smoke back then at the Garden. Boy. Think about that for a minute. Whew. And I remember the blue haze at Madison Square Garden. That's the first thing I remember. But the thing I remember the most when the new Garden was the different color sections. It went from red to orange to yellow to green to blue. And I always thought that was so cool. But just every time I walked into Madison Square Garden, the one thing I always remember was the energy. The building had great energy, and it didn't matter what the event was. But I remember as a kid walking into Madison Square Garden with my dad and my brother, and no matter what event we were going to, it always felt very special because the place was jumping and it was alive, and the energy, it was unbelievable. I mean, it's really hard to put into words what it was like going to all the various events that we went to, because the place was just alive. It was just alive.
I think you hit the nail on the head. Just the sports fans there. It's a different breed of fan. They appreciate the product on the court, and the focus usually is on the court.
I always tell the story about watching LSU play at Madison Square Garden with Pete Maravich, and Pistol Pete came out before anybody else. Think about this, a college kid coming out before the rest of his teammates and put on a dribbling exhibition for the crowd.
Wow, that is awesome. Kind of like how some of the modern day Curry does that, not to that degree, but with his pregame warm-up, that has become legendary for the young generation now.
I love Baki breaking down the game already with the U.S. and Serbia.
Oh, yeah. Baki's the go-to man. We need our correspondent breaking it down. Speaking of basketball, Grant, we talked a lot about, or last week, the Kings, and are they done with the roster? I got a soundbite for you. Monty McNair earlier this week asked a similar question. Here's what he had to say.
That this is probably the core of the group that we'll go into training camp with. But yeah, potentially 1 or 2 more roster spots. I think we're going to take our time a little bit and see there. Probably be more wing forward, big.
So what do you think about that if they roll into training camp with the roster as is right now?
I think that they, assuming that they have health, will be battling for the final playoff spot, not 7, 8, but 6 in the West, because I think that defensively they won't be as good as they were last year, but offensively they'll be better.
Yeah, and DraftKings they've released their NBA over-unders for wins. They have the Kings at 45.5. Fair number? You going over, under?
I would go over based on the last 2 years, but I think it's a fair number. What about you?
Yeah, I think it's fair, especially with the way that the Western Conference is geared up. The NBA Cup, they had their group draws. The Kings are part of Group A with Minnesota, Portland, Utah, Houston, and the Clippers. So 45.5 sounds about right, but definitely over. I think 49 sounds about where the Kings will be.
This one about my lawsuit. Any comment on the summary judgment of your lawsuit scheduled to be delivered on 7/16, hoping you receive good news? Yeah, I don't know if the judge will rule on summary judgment tomorrow. The judge may not rule on it until next week or the week after. So I don't know for sure when the judge will rule on it, but when he rules on it, I'll let you know.
There you go.
Yep. Out of my control, It's out of my hands.
You
One thing
did.
that's not out of my hands are the great people at New Works Plumbing and how awesome they are when it comes to your plumbing needs and repairs. Just go to sackserviceplumbing.com. That's sackserviceplumbing.com, or call the number on your screen. Remember that New Works Plumbing is available around the clock 24/7 for all of your plumbing needs. That's New Works Plumbing, sackserviceplumbing.com.
Boom. Nice hat by New Works, too. We are all geared out. Make sure you use them. They were just out at my house, too.
Love it. Awesome. All right. If you want to get in on the program, you can do so. We're not going to go super long today. We want to come on and talk about everything that was going on over the weekend. Do you watch any of the celebrity golf tournament at all?
I did. I watched Marty Fish get in there a little bit. Saw Tony Romo working on his new swing. Chuck, how about yourself?
A little bit. I'm very happy for Marty Fish. I used to talk to him every year when I was up at Lake Tahoe. He's a great guy, and he's always been a really, really good golfer. So it's very happy to see that.
Yeah, definitely. He was dialed in. He hits it hole high, smooth,
Yeah.
steady, smart player.
How about Charles? Huh? I love watching Charles Barkley,
He's
being
so
around
much
him.
fun.
He's the best.
He's so much fun. You spent a ton of time with him because you used to do interviews up at Tahoe that weekend.
All the time. Charles is a special person to me because, there's no BS with Charles. There's no political correctness. There's no, listen, he says some things that I'm like, come on, Charles, right? I mean, we all do. But the fact that he speaks from his heart and speaks how he feels, I love that about him. And again, he was my first interview when I started my podcast. He was my first ever guest.
Yep.
And I'll never forget that. I mean, that's pretty big for Charles to be the first guest. And I told him what I was doing. He felt awful about what happened to me. He had reached out to me shortly thereafter. And then a couple months later, when I decided to start my podcast, I reached out to him and I said, hey, this is what I'm doing. It would mean a lot to me. And he goes, absolutely. When do you need me? That's pretty cool.
Love it. That is really cool. And he'll be calling it quits after this season. That's going to be hard. That's going to be a different NBA temperature. He'll be missed. There's no doubt about it.
Yes, Bucky, that's Marty Fish, the tennis player. Yes, absolutely. And he won the celebrity golf tournament. I always think that's one of the best events in our area annually. It's just a tremendous event.
They do a great job getting the fans involved. Most of the players there are very receptive and interacting, and it's a fun course. The course isn't too hard. They don't take it too serious. And anytime, I always say, as a local kid that grew up here, take your kids up there for a weekend when the celebrity tournament's up there. It's inevitable. You will run into somebody, and a lot of them have time for you, which is the coolest part.
Yeah, I've always felt the best days to go up there if you really want to meet or get a picture or an autograph is Wednesday, the practice round, and Thursday, the pro-am, because it's very casual. These guys are playing to have fun, but they're really competitive. And when the ball goes, when you put that golf ball on the tee at hole 1 or 10, on Friday, they kind of changed their tone a little bit because they're really playing to play well because they're competitors.
Yeah, I'm sure there's no side bets there either,
Oh, my God. Wow.
My goodness. A great event, ran well. And then what happened in Miami, Grant? I know you know about all the whole news with Argentina and Colombia. The unrest, 1,600 medical calls, according to Miami-Dade. You had the president of the Colombia Federation arrested and his son for third-degree assault. They were arraigned today. A complete mess. Disgusting.
It's awful. It's such a sad indictment on the things that we see sometimes in our stadiums, and I know that's Miami we're talking about, but I'm talking about the video that we see on Mondays that was taken the day before at football games with brawls in the stands, and not to this magnitude, of course, but I don't know what else to say. I think the news and the video speaks for itself. It was horrible what happened. Awful.
Pretty bad. And the security risks. Now you know why some of the players are worried about their families when you have people climbing through vents, rushing gates, children being stomped on, Grant.
We had a warning. We had a warning about this from one of the players last week. We talked about this, right? About what happened. when the players on was it Uruguay or they were playing? I can't remember who was playing, but they went into the stands to protect their families, right?
Yep.
And the one player said, you know, there's no security here. I'm coming out and speaking about this because they need to do better. And then a couple of days later, look what happens.
It's incredible. The fact that the writing wasn't on the wall, and the bigger problem is you have a World Cup coming to America here in 2 years. It's not great marketing thinking about wanting to take your kids out to a game when you're seeing scenes like that with an international game.
I've never understood the amount of fan violence that we see not only in this country, but around the globe. And I understand that in my experience, 99% of it is alcohol induced. I mean, I used to see fights at the bleachers in Yankee Stadium at New York Giants games as a 3 and 4 year old, but not every Sunday, occasionally. Right. And the one thing that always stuck out to me, even at a very young age, was how erratic their behavior was with how they talked and everything. And then when I got old enough to understand what being inebriated was as a kid, like you knew that it's because they were just hammered, you know, and they can't control themselves. Some people just can't control themselves.
Yeah, and to a degree, I don't think some of that is premeditated. You get yourself to a point beyond your or out of control, I should say. This though, just it was different. Hey, I don't have a ticket, but I'm going to rush the gate and try to get.
Yeah, that was different. You're exactly right. That aspect was different, but yeah,
it's bad. So I get it.
Terrible.
It's a problem here in America.
Yep. All right. Again, we appreciate you being with us right here on If You Don't Like That. We also appreciate all the kind words we get for the folks that go visit Bennett's, whether it's Sacramento, Roseville, and the West Side Grill in Rockland. If you go to bennettsrestaurants.com, you can make a reservation or more. Don't forget about their happy hour daily, 2 to 6 sips and taste. Just really, you're going to love it. The share plate's tremendous. All the different types of wine at tremendous prices. Again, it's all there for you at Bennett's. Go to bennettsrestaurants.com. Prime seafood and steak at Bennett's. Again, bennettsrestaurants.com.
Making me hungry for those interested.
Yes.
End of the third quarter, Kings 65-49 over Utah from Vegas.
Whoopie-doo.
I know. What is going to be the payoff tonight? The Kings get another Summer League win. Yes. Some of the rookies, though, Grant,
another one or their first one?
Technically, their first one in Vegas. Yes.
Right.
Thank you for correcting.
No problem. Yep, absolutely. And then if they somehow win, Vivek can, make a big deal out of it and have all the hats and shirts and how big of a deal it is that the Kings won the Summer League. And, so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't see it happening, but Vivek would do that. I mean, the Lakers did raise a banner for the NBA Cup, the in-season tournament, my friend.
Embarrassing.
Next to legendary championship banners.
Embarrassing.
Legendary players, and then an in-season tournament.
Just embarrassing.
Awful. So
it really is. I'll tell you, I would hate for Sacramento to win that damn thing and then have a ceremony, at the Golden One Center and raise the banner and make a big deal out of that.
I hope that wouldn't happen. I really would. There's a lot of pressure on the Kings to retire Mike Bibby's number 10. I was going to say, what do you think? Why or why not?
I love Mike. I like Mike as a person. I know Mike very well. I'm a big fan of Mike. Mike had an incredible career and played very well in Sacramento and was instrumental in the Kings' success. But you don't retire his jersey. That's absurd.
Yeah, I don't know. He's part of that group, right? I think you can make an argument to a Sacramento Kings fan to retire everyone from that group, which would not be.
They didn't win anything. Why would you retire everything? They didn't win anything. They won nothing. They won nothing. I mean, let's call it the way it is. Why would you retire from that group? They didn't win anything. Now, had they won a championship, had they beat the Lakers and then went on and won a championship, I'd be okay with retiring everyone.
Sure.
But they didn't win anything. They lost.
Yeah, well, when you're a small market and you come that far, and I know
They
that far isn't good enough, but that's
they
where the
lost.
memory's at for a lot of this fan base.
They lost.
They did. They did.
All right.
Just saying.
The Utah Jazz never won a championship with Karl Malone and John Stockton. They're
Crazy.
the only two guys that from that team that had their jersey retired. They didn't retire everyone else. All right.
Yep. Fair point. The Kings got to be careful about that, though. That's the thing. You got to be careful about who you put up.
Well, here's the other deal. If you put Mike up, then you got to put Doug up. You got to put Bobby up. I mean, they gets carried away.
Right. Right. And I think that's the slippery slope. There's no doubt about that.
Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. Yes, I do 100%.
So, I mean, and then Rick Adelman should be honored.
Yes, no doubt.
Okay.
Adelman.
Well, my point is and I'm fine with honoring Rick just for his entire career, and he's in the Hall of Fame. But now think about this for a minute. Mike's not in the Hall of Fame.
Nope.
So, I mean, not that you need to be in the Hall of Fame. Pagier's not in the Hall of Fame. Not to be, but my point is, like, at some point, if you start retiring, and again, I don't want this to sound negative about Mike. I love Mike.
Yeah.
Mike was a tremendous player. Mike was, in many aspects, the real glue on that team next to Vladdy. I don't have anything bad to say about Mike. I have respect for Mike. I love Mike. But he doesn't deserve to have his jersey retired.
It's fair. I love Mike too. He's right there behind me on the piano. Big influence for me. But yeah, basketball wise, I think you're right.
It's like the morons that said DeMarcus needs to have his jersey retired. Really? He needs to have his jersey burnt, okay, and never, ever worn again, not because it was great, because he destroyed the franchise, okay? That's really what, you should have his jersey, maybe with horse manure and all kinds of other disgusting stuff on it, and put it in an enclosed, confined area where you can't smell it, but you can see it. That's what his jersey should be, all right?
Can't smell it, but you can see it. Yeah, and he continues to drag the Kings and past coaches, living and dead, under the bus, which makes no sense to me. It's an attempt to stay relevant.
If you didn't like Paul Westphal, you have a problem with you. If you think that Paul wasn't a good coach, I'm okay with that. But if you go talk to Kevin Johnson and Charles Barkley and Dan Marley and the other players that were on the Suns team that Paul coached to the NBA Finals against the Bulls, you won't hear a wry word, a negative word. You won't hear anything bad about Paul. They speak about him in tremendous accolades. I had Charles Barkley on my podcast back in 2020, and he spoke glowingly about Paul Westphal. That's Charles Barkley. And I'll tell you, you know this, I've shared this story before. I witnessed a lot of things in announcing 32 years of basketball. I saw a lot. I heard a lot. And sitting courtside at NBA games across the country, you hear and see things that most people don't. Okay?
Sure.
We're playing in China, in Shanghai. All right? We're playing against the Brooklyn Nets. Lionel Hollins is the head coach of the Nets, but Lionel got very sick and he couldn't coach. So Paul was the head assistant, and Paul coached the team for the Brooklyn Nets. Preseason, Shanghai, right? Everybody's in a festive mood. It's a great opportunity to showcase your NBA basketball, which they love in China. Love it.
Yep.
Love
and
it.
for the guys, see a part of the world that you might not go to. I remember the pictures at the Great Wall and the whole experience. Yes. Spectacular.
In all my years of covering sports, going to China was one of the highlights of my career. Spectacular. I mean, I'll just leave it at that. And Paul Westphal is up on the sideline coaching his team. And this big idiot runs down the floor and goes, "Why don't you shut the F up and sit the F down, blah, blah, blah." Then later in the game, he gets a technical. Then he's at the foul line, not at the foul line, but on the block, right? Like waiting for a rebound. And Paul is giving instructions to his team. DeMarcus turns around and says, "Hey, why don't you shut up and he looks, and DeMarcus yells at the team, "This guy doesn't know what the F he's doing anyway. Don't even listen to him." He ends up getting kicked out of the game. Michael Malone was so pissed at him that Michael did not even play him in the next game at Beijing.
Wow.
Didn't even play him. The next night, we're in Beijing on an off night, and they have the red carpet dinner for the Nets and the Kings. David Stern was there. All the NBA dignitaries dress, suit and tie. It's a big deal, all right?
Yeah.
I mean, all the China dignitaries that were responsible for putting on the China games, right? Paul Westphal walks up to me. I'm standing there with Star. Paul walks up to me and says to me, he goes, you saw what happened last night, right? I go, yeah. He goes, can you believe that? And I said, Paul, I honestly cannot believe it. And Paul says to me, in all of my years of being involved in the sport of basketball, from the earliest time that I can remember to now, that is the most I have ever been disrespected in my life. He goes, can you believe that? And I said, sadly, you know what? Because it's him, I can believe it. Do you know how awful that is? Like the guy had no filter, was not able to control himself. People always say his relationship with Michael Malone. Michael tolerated him, all right? The fact that Michael Malone did not want DeMarcus back on the Nuggets after they signed him a couple of years ago for the final 2 months in the playoffs, all right? And people were talking about, gee, Michael loves DeMarcus and DeMarcus loves Michael. Well, he didn't love him that much because he didn't even have him come back. They didn't even offer him a minimum contract. They didn't want him anywhere near the team after that, all right? But listen, if you don't like a coach, I'm fine with that. You played sports all your life. I did.
Yep.
There were coaches I didn't like.
Sure.
But I try to respect my coaches, but I would have never shown them up like that. Can you believe that?
No. And it's something to me, I'm surprised was not self-regulated by the other members of the Kings, or something didn't happen on the court where they defend Westfall. I mean, it's BS. There's a line, it. You sat there courtside, as you said, many years. It's beyond belief.
And then this has been documented on the way to Beijing. He got Nick Stauskas, who was a rookie, up against the outside of the bus, and the hazing that was going on was beyond anything that I experienced even at my fraternity house.
Wow.
In the 70s. It was this, and the sad thing is nobody stepped in and ever did anything because everyone was like so fed up with the guy that they did the Rudy Gays of the world, and they couldn't do anything because they were just like, there's nothing that can be done, and it was sad. And yet, and then I hear some of these morons like Jason Jones, all right, and others talk about him having his jersey retired. You're naive and you're stupid with a capital S if you are one of those that are endorsing him having his jersey retired. There could be nothing more embarrassing for the franchise. And by the way, it's never going to happen, so don't even worry about it. But the fact that people even bring that up, it's embarrassing.
It'd be interesting to see who would show up for that, theoretically, if DeMarcus's jersey was retired. Real interesting.
Here's one. Malone had DMC playing well until the Kings' stupidity fired him. You're right. It was stupid that they fired him. They should have kept Isaiah Thomas and traded DeMarcus. Listen, DeMarcus played well for a good portion of his career. It's not that Michael had him playing well. Do you know what coach had DeMarcus playing the best basketball of his career? It was George Karl. George took DeMarcus and changed his complete game around by implementing the three into his game and utilizing him. Look at all the triple doubles that DeMarcus had when George Karl was the coach. And yet that was a relationship that was destroyed before DeMarcus even walked into the Kings locker room after the All-Star break because of the rhetoric coming from his camp. And it was George that had no chance of happening, no chance of succeeding before it even happened, before it even started.
Yep, he got an opportunity to do what some of these guys are doing now at his position at a much earlier time.
Yep, he flourished when George was the coach. George saw his talents and brought in his game to incorporate the three. And again, he had more triple doubles under George. Anyway, thought I'd put that out there. Hey, before we move on, I want to tell you about Sunrise Landing and this great residential community in Calusa from Blazona Development. And if you go and check out all of their various models, 6 to choose from, no Mellorews, no homeowners, close to the Calusa Golf and Country Club, great access to I-5, Highway 45, Highway 20. It's Sunrise Landing. And I'm going to give you the website. Just go to CalusaSunrise.com. There it is. Check it out, CalusaSunrise.com, and you'll get all the information you need at Sunrise Landing in Calusa. You ready to get a call or two?
Yeah, let's do it. Michael, welcome in tonight.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
How are you, Michael?
Doing great. It's much cooler than last week. My gosh. As I heard about DeMarcus Cousins jersey retired. I don't know why would anybody want DeMarcus to get his jersey retired. It doesn't make sense. Yes, he has talent, okay, but his attitude and his sturdy play, what I saw in his career, shouldn't be tolerated in the NBA or any other things I've ever seen. He's one of the worst. What do you say?
I said he'll never have his jersey retired anywhere that he ever played.
Yeah. Basically, if they want to have their jersey retired, they have to show heart, they have to work hard, no bad attitudes. It takes effort. You have to play your best.
And I want to get to this. That also ruined him. He was a beast inside, then became a perimeter player. No, it actually revolutionized his game, and it completely was the way the NBA was going. And George had enough foresight to see that and increase his value and his talent. So no, I totally disagree with you. But go ahead, Michael.
Yeah, sorry about that. Like I was saying, though, I think George Karl was, better for DeMarcus Cousins. But, the way DeMarcus got in the relationship with coaches, I feel sorry for the coaches that had to deal with DeMarcus Cousins. They don't deserve that kind of moment. I mean, the way I saw DeMarcus get flagrant 2, it's unacceptable. Like, I remember that game against the Celtics. He committed a dirty play on Marcus Smart. It's unacceptable. He's a dirty player, almost like Draymond Green.
Well, I'll tell you, one of the referees in that game, and I'm not going to mention his name, in that game, okay? After that incident happened, in the middle of the game, there's a timeout, and this official is walking towards the scores table, and he looks at me, and we're in commercial break, and I take my headset off, and he says, "That boy needs a psychiatrist."
Yeah.
The referee says that to me now again, that boy needs a psychiatrist. He says that to me as he's walking to the scores table during a timeout. I was like, and I'm like, yep.
He needs help.
How about that? NBA ref said that to me in the middle of the game.
That's great job of the officials to point that out. I think that's
well, yeah, they knew too. But anyway, I'll never forget that.
That was a good one.
Forget that.
That was a good one. Yeah. By the way, what are your guys' thoughts about DeMar DeRozan signing with Sacramento? I mean, can he be a great?
Makes the Kings a better team for right now.
Wow. I mean, it got me excited. And I'm like, oh yeah, I like DeMar DeRozan in Sacramento. I think it could make the game so much easier for Fox. You have 2 clutch guys. I mean, my gosh, if these 2 guys are clutch at the same time in the same year, I don't know if anyone want to play Sacramento in a close game. I don't know. That's DeMar's a better free throw shooter.
He's going to be able to guard anybody. That's the question. He's not a very good defensive player.
I mean, plus, I just hope the Western Conference is I hope we can overcome the Pelicans game. That was our weakness. I'm just wondering though, would DeMar DeRozan be the answer for the Kings when they were struggling against the Pelicans? So I mean,
Ryan, we talk about the Pelicans a lot. I got to see what their roster is going to look like. They've had a lot of changes, and will Brandon Ingram be on the team or will he not be on the team? I can't talk about the Pelicans until I know what the roster is going to look like.
Yeah, everything I'm hearing about Brandon Ingram is the Pelicans are not willing to pay him the max money that he is looking for right now, which puts into question. In fact, if you want to talk about the DeMar DeRozan trade really quick, it kind of reset the market in a sense with Zach LaVine. It also reset the market with Brandon Ingram. A lot of those teams were waiting to see what the Kings did.
Yeah.
And you got DeJounte Murray now on New Orleans, and I think he's going to be really good for them at point. So, they've
with CJ McCollum
pulled their team, but they lose Valanciunas to Washington. So they're going to and they lost Larry Nance Jr. I don't really know what to expect from New Orleans.
Where he went though, Larry Nance Jr.?
He left. He left. Where did he go, Ryan? Off the top of my head, I forget. But anyway, hey, Michael, the West is going to be tough again. We appreciate it as always for you joining us.
Well, let's be the best.
Thanks, Michael.
Yep.
Interesting enough, the Pelicans also 45.5 wins. So Vegas has the Kings and the Pelicans in the same type of tier.
By the way, this one, like DeRozan, but he's 35, and we had to give up 2 twos, and he doesn't play D. We are still too small. Well, first of all, giving up 2 twos doesn't mean anything. It's like giving up nothing.
It's the cost of doing business right now.
I mean, that means absolutely nothing. As far as doesn't play D, I wouldn't say he doesn't play D. He's just not very good. And as far as being too small, it's July 15th. The season doesn't start until October.
Yep. Spot on. We bring in our man, Zach. Welcome in tonight, Zach.
Hey, I had a quick question about this, DeMarcus. As far as Jimmer, Stauskas, and McLemore, how much do you think DeMarcus altered their careers by just the hazing?
In my opinion, he completely ruined Nick Stauskas' career.
Wow.
Jimmer really wasn't. I always tell the story. I was at Champs Sports Bar at the Marriott in Indianapolis, watching the NCAA tournament with Scott Pollard. We were getting ready to play the Pacers the next night, and Scott and I went to watch the tournament. And Jimmer was going off for BYU, and I made a comment, and Scott goes, "He won't be able to play in the NBA." I go, "What are you talking about?" He goes, "Just telling you, he won't be able to play in the NBA." And I was like, "Yeah, right." Anyway, and Scott was right. He couldn't play in the NBA. It was just something that Scott saw in him that he said his game will not translate to the NBA. Who was the other person? Ben McLemore, same thing. But Nick Stauskas was DeMarcus bullied Nick Stauskas, and I mean bullied him unlike anything that I've seen in all my years of covering basketball. And the worst part was the organization allowed it to go on.
Bingo.
And they are as culpable as anyone else for not putting a stop to that. It was awful. And anyone that was around the team would tell you such, and anyone that tells you otherwise is lying to you. All right? They're lying to you. It was awful.
Stauskas was drafted, was it 13 or 14?
I don't remember off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't remember the year. Doesn't matter the year, but yeah.
You were saying something about that, because on that team, you're saying the oldest vet was Rudy Gay, and you're saying
Well, I mentioned Rudy as one of the vets on the team that I remember. I don't know who the oldest vet was off the top of my head. I mean, there were other players that were John Salmons, I think, was on that team, and there were some other vets, but off the top of my head, I can't recite the roster because they all run together in my head.
Because I just can't imagine you being that rookie and then not getting no one else standing up for you to this guy.
They tried at times, and then they put their hands up in the air because nothing was. I mean, it was terrible.
I can imagine. Hey, Greg, just got a quick question for you personally, and then I'll go. During your tenure with the Kings, did you ever get to know any of the cameramen?
Any of the what?
Any of the cameramen?
Yeah, I knew a lot of them.
Do you know someone named Mark? Did you ever recognize? Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah. Well, there was more than one, but yes, I do. Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to give a last name because back in the mid '90s, my uncle actually worked for the Kings as a cameraman under the baseline.
Cool.
Amen.
I just wanted a fun fact.
Thank you, buddy. I appreciate it.
Exactly.
You take care.
For sure.
One of the best cameramen that I've ever worked with was also one of the lead cameramen on the CBS #1 crew for football, John Pavlovich.
Oh, wow.
And Pav always was, when he wasn't doing network, and he worked with Jim Nance and Phil Simms every Sunday. He was on the field, and he was one of the best cameramen that CBS had. He also did the Olympics for NBC. He did everything. The guy was so gifted. And when I was doing a game and Pav was there, I never worried about anything. Didn't matter what could happen. We could lose power. There could be an earthquake, whatever. It wouldn't have mattered. When Pav was there, I had a sense of complete calmness where I didn't worry about anything. And Pav tragically died about 7-8 years ago, give or take. And it was devastating. And I'll never forget Pav, how gifted he was, how talented he was. And I worked with some tremendous people in the business over the years, and he maybe was number one on my list in terms of the talent and his work ethic and everything that he did. He was great and so nice too. I'll never forget. He when they were doing a game in Oakland or San Francisco, he would say to me, "Hey, Napes, if your son wants to come and be my runner for me and, wants to, be the one that holds the cable and I can teach him how to do it. It will take 10 minutes for me to teach him. If he wants to come work with me on the game this Sunday, you let me know, or next Sunday, and I'll make it happen." He was just great.
It's incredible. It's incredible. It seems like when you're with a crew like that, it becomes family. You're together so much.
Yeah. Well, we were family. But I'll never forget, during the football season, he was never there on the weekends because he was shooting for CBS, and he would normally leave on a Thursday or a Friday because they had to set up they just set up everything. Like they had to run all the cable. I mean, it was quite a thing, but Pav would leave on maybe a Friday. I can't, depending on where he was going. And I used to remember watching a game, and I love watching the games sometimes in December or the playoff games in January at frigid conditions. And there would be Pav, kneeling on the sideline with his camera as a player is running right at him, and he never flinched. And, he had the gloves with the fingers cut off because he's
nice.
So he could control the camera.
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Pav, man, how do you do that?" He goes, "Man, it is brutal." He's in New England. He did all those championship games in New England and I was like, "Yeah." He goes, "Man," but I go, "Pav, you're so good." And I'll tell you how good he was. Jim Nantz and Phil Simms would occasionally talk about him for the shot that he got, or he'd be on a replay, especially a pass that goes into the corner of the end zone, right? And Pav would be situated, on his knees, shoot in the corner of the end zone as the player caught the ball and was being tackled or pushed out of bounds right at Pav. And, very often a player would have to hurdle Pav and his camera. Pav never moved. He got the shot. And Nance and Sims were talking about, "Man, look at this. Look at our boy Pav. What a great job he's doing." And then he always used to tell me in Dallas or Thanksgiving, wherever they were, they would have a bowling tournament the day before on a Wednesday for the CBS crew that would go to wherever they were, whether it was they were in Dallas or they were in Detroit, wherever, because they would go back and forth depending. And he said, "Oh, we always had a bowling tournament, and Phil and Nance and the crew." And he goes, "It was so much fun. We had a Thanksgiving dinner." It was great stories,
That is awesome. Bet he saw some good end zone celebrations right in front of him. Probably some of the most legendary ones.
He saw it all. But it was good stuff. All right, buddy. You enjoy your Monday evening.
Yes, you as well, my friend.
I look forward to it. Thanks, everyone. Nice. Had a couple laughs. See, we accomplished what I wanted to accomplish today in 55 minutes. I wanted to laugh a little bit, reminisce, share some stories, and kind of get away from what the hell's going on in our world.
Amen.
That's all you can say. Amen. And I will say amen too. All right. Love it. Grant and the ref told you that about DeMarcus should visit. Psychiatric was Dan Crawford. I can bet on it. I watched that game, of course. It was not Dan Crawford, guy that I just love. It was not Dan. All right. And by the way, if you mention an official's name, I won't say, yeah, that was him. But I'm telling you, it was not Dan Crawford. All right, buddy. You have a good one. To everyone else, thank you very much. Don't forget, Ryan, 2:00 tomorrow, the King's Court, right?
Yes, sir. Jerry Reynolds.